Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the drama surrounding the murder of Lesotho's former First Lady ratchets up a notch. Prime Minister Thomas Thabane is now set to be charged with the killing of his ex. His current spouse has already faced charges. Also, leaders from competing sides in South Sudan's civil war say that they are set to form a unity government by the weekend. Peace is desperately sought in a country where the UN says civilians have been deliberately starved and abused by both sides of the 6-year conflict. And Togo is heading into elections. Longtime leader Faure Gnassingbé is running for a 4th term, and the vote is expected to extend his family's decades-long dynasty. We take a closer look. But first, Lesotho's Prime Minister is being charged with the murder of his estranged wife. Thomas Thabane is due in court on Friday, accused of having played a part in the fatal shooting of Lipolelo Thabane in 2017. The couple were going through a bitter divorce at the time. Just days after her death, Thabane was sworn in as Prime Minister with his current wife at his side. Now, Messiah Thabane has also been charged over Lipolelo's murder. Thomas Thabane ignored a call by his ABC party to quit by this Thursday and has said instead that he'll be gone by July 31st. Jane Flanagan tells us more about why the Prime Minister is being charged now when suspicions about the circumstances surrounding Lipolelo's death have been flying around for years.
What links the Prime Minister to the killing of the late First Lady is a phone that police say they have traced a call from the crime scene to a phone belonging to the Prime Minister. As you say, his current wife has already been charged, and police say it is not he or she that pulled the trigger, but definitely there was collaboration with the killers, the gunmen who shot her outside her own home 2 years ago. Now, there is unhappiness within the Thabane family that the First Lady has been given bail, despite the fact that she's facing this very serious charge. And they're now trying to revoke the bail, describing her as dangerous and a flight risk. You will recall, Georgia, that it took some time before the First Lady handed herself into police, and she was identified as a wanted criminal for quite some time in Lesotho.
When it comes to Thomas Thabane, it looks like we've finally got a date, sort of, by which he says he'll be leaving office. That's the end of July. That's still quite a ways away. Can he, under the circumstances, truly expect to hold on that long?
Well, it was remarkable, wasn't it? I mean, he spoke today confirming that he would stand down many weeks after his resignation was demanded. And he made no mention of the charges hanging over him, the fact that he's due in court tomorrow, the fact that the First Lady is facing a trial on murder, which is due to start next month. And it is as though he thinks he can buy this time, but he himself knows how volatile the situation can flare up so quickly in Lesotho. During his first term as Prime Minister, he had to flee to South Africa during an attempted political coup. In recent years, the chief of the army was assassinated. The state security structures are heavily politicized in Lesotho. It's a very, very volatile kingdom. And his ABC party presides over a very fragile coalition, and none of the partners are happy with what the Prime Minister said today. They see it's absolutely unconscionable that a man in his position facing these serious charges can hold on to power for all that time. And given the ABC have also hardened their stance against him now, describing him as a threat to the nation. It seems remarkable that he thinks he can linger for so long. He knows well that when there is a sluggish or an uneasy transition to power, then things can get dangerous in Lesotho. But at the moment, the ABC is a very divided party, and they simply can't agree on, if he goes, who will replace him.
Jane Flanagan there for us in South Africa. Now, the leaders of the rival sides of South Sudan's 6-year civil war have agreed to form a government by Saturday's deadline. There had been fears that the coalition, which is a key term of a 2018 peace deal, would face another hold-up. But on Thursday, rebel leader Riek Machar and President Salva Kiir announced that the unity cabinet would go ahead. The current peace, though, is still extremely fragile, and past agreements have failed to hold up for long. Through the years of conflict, civilians have been the ones to pay the highest price. UN investigators accuse both sides of having deliberately pushed the communities of their rivals to the brink of starvation. James Vazina tells us more.
Starving their own people for political gain. This is the accusation directed at South Sudan's leaders. The United Nations is accusing the government and opposition forces of crimes against humanity. The organisation says it's put together a report of evidence with names of those responsible for intentionally putting civilians in the crossfire of the civil war.
Deliberate starvation is quite clearly occurring along ethnic and political lines in an effort to marginalise dissident communities as well as those perceived to be too disenfranchised to challenge the status quo or demand transitional justice mechanisms.
Amid the planned starvation, widespread corruption in the oil-rich country has lined the pockets of the elite at the expense of millions of citizens.
Instead of channeling resources into development, cynical officials have siphoned off essential resources to line their own pockets, while South Sudanese citizens go hungry and sick, and children are not getting the education they need to promote the future development of the country that it so desperately needs.
Some months have seen up to 80% of non-oil revenue being diverted from state accounts by politicians. Despite the signing of a peace deal in 2018, the country's still struggling to end its brutal civil war. Since 2013, an estimated 400,000 people have been killed, 4 million forced from their homes, and 6 million people, half of the population, face extreme hunger.
Well, South Africa's president has broken his silence over the controversy concerning former President F.W. de Klerk's remarks this month, in which he denied apartheid was a crime against humanity. The 83-year-old has since apologised, but current leader Cyril Ramaphosa has said that calling white minority rule anything other than a crime against humanity was treasonous.
Apartheid was so immoral in its conception and so devastating in its execution that there is no South African living today who is not touched by its legacy. I would even go on to say that to deny this, in my view, is treasonous. It cannot be gainsaid that apartheid was inherently a crime against humanity. It was a crime against the oppressed people of South Africa, even before it was so declared by the United Nations in 1973.
Now, Togo is heading into elections on Saturday. Longtime leader Faure Gnassingbé is running for a fourth term. His family has been at the head of the country since the 50s. Our correspondent sent us this report on the final days of campaigning.
After 15 years in power, Togo's president still cuts a relaxed figure on the campaign trail. Faure Gnassingbé's grip appears as strong as ever as he bids for a fourth term in office. The massive protests of 2017 and 2018 calling for his exit are a distant memory. They fizzled out after a crackdown, and more recent opposition efforts to get the courts to stop him running again have failed. His family's been running the country since 1953, and he's confident he's right where he should be.
No group of individuals should want to change that by force. Instead, we have to tell ourselves that we're on the path of progress.
Constitutional changes last May mean Gnassingbé could run for 2 more 5-year terms. He's up against 6 candidates this Saturday. Among them is main opposition leader Jean-Pierre Fabre, who also ran for the top job in 2010 and 2015. He still believes he won those elections, not Gnassingbé.
We believe that fraud led to this situation. It is not about drawing conclusions of fraudulent situations, just minimizing fraud.
This time around, Fabre has lost the support of some of his former allies. Instead, several have backed a new coalition to challenge the incumbent. Its candidate is Agbayome Kojo, a former Prime Minister and President of the National Assembly. His supporters think his understanding of the system gives him an edge.
You can be sure that the victory will be so big that people who are used to tampering with the results and the votes will not be able to do it again. without being met with the resistance of the people.
For the first time, voters in Togo will elect their president in 2 rounds. Despite calls for an end to his dynasty, the lack of a unified opposition could still mean a first-round victory for Gnassingbé.
And finally, Brits with Somali heritage are being encouraged to learn traditional textile and creative skills. The founder of Hasfa Studio is putting a particular focus on participation from older women who may still have skills to share that they haven't had a chance to use since fleeing conflict in Somalia years ago. Take a look.
I'm Hafsa. What do you want to do? Yeah. Imagine it. My name is Hafsa Yusuf. I'm a textile print designer and founder of Hafsa Studio, and I'm here today to teach a creative art workshop with the women from the community to engage them with their creativity and a way of expression. I'm from Somalia, so Somali culture we have such a vibrant, beautiful culture, and we have a rich history of textiles, art, and a lot of that after the war, a lot of that has been left behind. So we have it, so why not bring it back to the women here? We do these classes every week, so every Wednesday we have these classes. And it has been absolutely wonderful. The women really enjoy it, as you can tell in the class.
I came here tense and now I'm smiling, so I feel I don't want to go home.
It's put me in a positive mood, a little bit.
A lot of the women that I work with are elderly women from the community as well. Some who have beautiful stories and, just the beautiful personal stories that they haven't been able to share. Some of the women, they used to be weavers back home. Some of them used to do textiles, all handmade, and I think also, again, with my heritage, there's just so much history, there's so much textiles, there's so much skill that I think has been untold, hasn't been seen and it's been untold. So this brings it back. So it's something very personal to the women. And as you could just tell, how they are today, it's like bringing them back to the skills that they had previously and the skills that they left behind, and just reconnecting. So it's just celebrating Somali culture through art, and really just bringing it out there.
Well, thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa. More coming up shortly. Take care.